Exploration ideas. Exploration ideas consist of colonial ventures, conquest for the New World, quest for the New World, although ideally you'll be conquesting them soon enough. Overseas exploration, land of opportunity, viceroys, free colonies, and global empire, followed by the finisher. So, colonial ventures, +1 colonists. This lets you start new colonies to colonize, or if you already had a colonist, to colonize more without running into the increased colony cost for exceeding your colonist capacity. Keep in mind that this idea may not be useful until you have the ability to actually go exploring or the colonial range to reach the places you want to colonize, which will be helped by the second and third ideas of this idea group. Speaking of which, the second idea group, Quest for the New World, it allows you to hire explorers and conquistadors. Aside from some pretty bloody rare and usually luck-based workarounds, it is the only way to get conquistadors and explorers. There is a way to get an explorer from pirating, but it's a very long meantime to happen event, and basically it's not a reliable way. So if you want to reliably explore, especially ocean, you need this. So when taken early and for nations with suitable positioning, so not it's much harder for Russia to use naval exploration to get to America quickly than it is, say, Portugal or Spain. It helps you ensure that you're the first to access colonial regions or trade company regions of interest. So probably the Mexico and Incan high gold areas, or else Cape Town, some of the African coast, Kilwa, Indonesia, and India. The conquistadors also can provide they let you go do the search for the 7 cities exploration, which can provide you with the 7 cities bonuses if you successfully find the fabled 7 cities, which range from marginal buffs to actually quite strong buffs. There's something like 12 extra development for the province where you find it, and as well as a ticking for the rest of the game things like extra gold or whatnot, extra base tax. Extra base tax income, not extra base tax in the province, although I already mentioned the 12. The third idea, overseas exploration, your plus 50% colonial range. So you can explore and colonize further provinces 50% extra distance away. This lets you island hop further, getting to colonial trade company regions, or possibly new expansion regions, or even just specific provinces of interest before other colonizers, such as the already mentioned areas like Mexico, Indonesia, or specific provinces. Cape is a very good one because you can use that as an easy way of cutting off all the trade from Indonesia and India, funnel it all into Cape, where you will have a dominating trade control, more or less just from owning that one province. It helps you explore the world more quickly because you have extra range and you can island hop further. This extra vision is also useful for being opportunistic in expansion avenues. The fourth idea, land of opportunity, plus 20% global settler rate. Note that this is twice as strong than the plus 10 provided by the expansion idea group idea. So usage cases, this is extremely strong early game, where it is an extremely large increase to the colony growth rate relative to the base. However, late game, because you unlock more and more base settler rate as diplotechs go up, it gets more and more marginally useful. It helps you finish colonizing colonies faster, which lets you get colonial nations sooner, which lets you get their extra merchants, their contributions to the economy, lets you beat others to getting papal approval for a region. It also means it's sort of a passive income buff because your colonies finish faster, so you aren't spending as much time with your colonist building a colony. The individual colonies grow faster, so they start returning an income faster, or at least a more significant amount of income. So it's a passive income boost in those measures. And as already mentioned, it allows for, or in the same way that the extra colonial range helps your speed of island hopping and getting to regions of interest, so does the fact that those colonies which you can push further out finish faster. Boop. Viceroys, plus 20% global tariffs. Your tariffs from colonial nations are increased. So this helps you extract maximum economic value from a colonial nation. However, a large colonial nation with a high tariff rate will become harder and harder to maintain as a loyal subject from the mid to late game, and may require some actions such as paying down prestige or contributing development to keep them in line. Now, you might think, contributing development to my colonial nation, that's a waste of monarch points. Well, just sit down for a second and actually do the math. If the colonial nation's paying you like 20 or 30 something ducats a month, and that's enough to let you buy an extra level on an advisor, or maybe pay for one or two advisors that you wouldn't normally be paying for, then sure, if you need to occasionally return 60% of the extra monarch points you get from having that higher level advisor back to the colonial nation to keep them loyal, you're still coming out ahead. So do the math there, and it can often actually work out in your favor. Just keep in mind the outlay to payback ratio there. If you're trying to keep a huge CN with significant tariff rate loyal, it isn't necessarily that huge a deal. But what it can do is be a bit micro-intensive, which is why sometimes I avoid it, and also it reduces the colonial nation's combat potential. If they're paying you so much of their base income, or their base tax income, when their other incomes are relatively low, it means they don't have as much income to contribute to their own armies and their own infrastructure. So they won't be building manufactories in their own land, helping to pump up how much trade value and trade income they're pushing out, which means that you in turn can't mooch that, or they'll be running smaller armies, which, if you keep pushing them militarily, can lead to a debt spiral. So just be careful with how much you're trying to extract from your colonial nations, or keep in mind that you may have to actually feed back some of that gold from time to time. Second to last idea is free colonies, an extra colonist. Again, this lets you, as before, start more and more colonies. Same bonuses as before. I'm not gonna overplay that. Final idea, global empire. Plus 25% naval force limit modifier. It allows you to have a larger navy, because you've got more naval force limit, assuming that the force limit was the limiting factor for you and not paying for the boats. This is actually, for a global empire, like, it's a good descriptive. If you've got all these colonists and you're probably going to be developing colonial nations far away, or building lots of colonies in distant locations. So maybe you're European and you're building them in Africa, or maybe you're an Indonesian and you're building them in the New World, or in Africa again. In any case, you need to be able to move around your armies from location to location, and especially if you're doing islands, and you've got to sort of have at least some measure of a combat navy, otherwise people will be able to just lock down the location of your armies and beat you up everywhere else. Additionally, this can be used to ferry around units on top of your developing colonies if you aren't using the no native uprising thing. It lets you have a larger merchant navy, which can not only help provide you with more income, but deny enemies more income. Always keep in mind that it's a zero-sum game there. You might think, oh, I'm only breaking even with my trade ships. They cost pretty much exactly the same amount of money that they are making me. But every single bit of extra cash that they're making you is a bit of cash that someone else who could potentially be your enemy isn't making. So keep in mind the zero-sum gameplay there. One thing, if you've got a huge navy, from time to time you're going to want to be upgrading them. If you start hitting the naval force limit, rather than upgrading your ships, if you've got a large number of colonial nations that don't have a full navy, it might be worth thinking about gifting your old ships to your colonial nations or other subjects and just building the ships from new to improve the size of your total subjects plus yourself navy, so that you look more frightening to potential attackers, to help your colonial nations and subjects themselves get more trade income, and also to help them prevent, to ferry around their troops, to help them potentially do little helpful things like blockade straits, or pop out and slow down an enemy fleet that might otherwise annoy you. And finally, the finisher. So the bonus is that you can fabricate claims in overseas colonial regions. Usage cases. You no longer need sea tile adjacency to fabricate claims in colonial regions. which allows for much better timing of wars against Native Americans. You can get the claims before you have an adjacent colony, then start ferrying your troops across at the same time that you are sending your colonist lands, your troops land, and immediately declare war on them. To allow you to quickly expand in a region without needing to tediously get one claim, get a new border, get a new claim, now you border someone else, finish that war, now you border a third person. You just get all the claims at once and you can declare all the wars at once and do something like absorb all of Mexico, or at least not all of Mexico, but something like a third to a half of Mexico at a time. Just one thing to keep in mind is don't get caught out by migrating natives. So if you fabricate a claim on a native that can move, that can migrate, and then they move, the claim is not useful for you unless they happen to move back to the same location they just came from before the claim expires. It also allows you to be potentially very opportunistic against any coastal natives. So if you can see one of the coastal native Mexicans, say, getting beaten up by Spain or struggling with a war with one of the other Mexican nations, you could generate a claim even though you don't have a share sea tile and dogpile them whilst their allies won't honour, whilst they have low manpower, whilst they have a ruined economy, and take advantage of that. So, to summarise, exploration provides a large number of strong bonuses for colonisation, outshining the expansion idea group in this regard significantly. It allows for reliable hiring of explorers and conquistadors, speeding up map revelation and providing vision for being opportunistic in dogpiling weakened nations. It's best taken early, as certainly by the late game and often by the mid, it can be very difficult to compete with existing colonial powers in developing new nations, or there may even be no colonizable spaces in range anymore. So everyone might have colonized everything that's near enough to colonize as their hopping points across to the New World, or their hopping points across to some region of interest. Also, be aware that taking the high gold regions in the Mexican and Incan areas will very often lead to conflict with the traditional colonial powers of Great Britain, Spain, France, and Portugal, who will see that land as rightfully theirs and will happily declare war for it, and may even break stable long-term alliances because they want the gold provinces with a burning, insatiable desire.